Hello and welcome to the Crypto Sky Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Today we've got another awesome episode. I recently conducted an interview with Miss Desiree Dickerson. For those of you who are not familiar with her, Desiree is a leader in the blockchain space and is currently working with Women for Women, a nonprofit organization who's utilizing blockchain technology to improve the ladies in third world countries' livelihood. She's also a writer for 21 Cryptos, a popular magazine in the crypto space. I was really impressed by how well-spoken and intelligent Desiree was, and I really enjoyed having the opportunity to chat with her. We covered everything from how she made the transition from the science field to the blockchain space, and also where she sees businesses being able to apply blockchain technology in the future. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, and if you do, please remember to support the podcast by sharing it to your friends and family via social media, and also if you're listening on iTunes, remembering to subscribe and leave a positive review. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. Hello, Desiree. I want to say thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and welcome you to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I know it's been a little difficult to schedule, but I'm excited to be on.
All right, so for the people who don't really know you, kind of talk about your background and then go into how you made the transition from a science field to the crypto space.
Right. So I have my master's in biophysics and physiology, so I have a very science background. I've done a lot of research in genetics and in ecology and evolution, and from there I actually stopped doing research, and so I went into management consulting and focused really on business strategy and operations, a lot with healthcare and large-scale IT enterprises. So I did that for a while, and I was always interested in crypto since I was in grad school, when I kind of was always on Reddit and stumbled on Dogecoin. But then about a year and a half ago, I actually decided to kind of just like start helping out. And, I feel like just helping out for free and giving away your best work for free is definitely the best. So I, helped out with a couple of white papers, about a year and a half ago, and really just tried to get as involved as I possibly could. And then about, 6 to 8 months ago, I started working with this nonprofit as their blockchain and digital currency fellow, and that's what I've been working on for the past 6 months, and it's been an amazing experience. And I've really just tried to get involved in the space as much as possible. So with 21 Cryptos and whale reports, and really any way I can kind of get my toes wet and all this great information, and there's such a great community. That's kind of what I've been doing, and that's kind of how the whole transition happened.
Okay, definitely. So talk a little bit about what Women for Women International is and what your role is with them.
Right. So Women for Women International is an amazing organization. If you're not familiar, they actually do a lot of work with women in post-conflict marginalized areas. And this is a lot of social and economic empowerment initiatives. It actually is a year-long program where the women take these classes and they get a monthly stipend to kind of further their entrepreneurial pursuits. So the organization works with them throughout that year. And so I was brought on through the Hilton Prize Coalition about, 6 to 8 months ago. And I was brought in to really look at if the organization could leverage blockchain technology to further their mission of empowering these women. So we're really thinking women in South Sudan, Afghanistan, places where they're very, very post-conflict. So that is kind of what I've been working on. It's been a really interesting opportunity. We largely focused on the financial use cases. I mean, the possibilities are really endless, but kind of for the sake of really staying in line with the organization's mission and thinking about the actual feasibility of a project like this, we focused on financial services, and those being the remittance for those monthly stipends, and then also kind of banking for the unbanked, and creating digital wallets and giving women the ability to actually own their own finances and really run a household in that capacity.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, that really sounds like a good mission. So you mentioned you work with 21 Cryptos. Kind of talk about your role with them, and then how you've kind of helped jumpstart their magazine.
Yeah, I mean, so I've just come on board. It's an amazing team. They've really done a wonderful job with getting up and running. I think I can't remember what issue we're on now, but I jumped on board really as a content creator, and that's kind of what I've been doing. So I write mostly about the culture around cryptocurrency. I mean, there's so many experts. I don't know if you've got a chance to leaf through it, but I mean, it's 100 pages of like very, very valuable content. There's so many experts writing about TA, fundamental analysis as well. So I was just kind of thinking, that was already being done in the first couple issues, and so I got involved to kind of round out the magazine and bring in kind of what's going on in crypto, like what's the culture in the community at that time. So I mean, I think last month or the month before, I wrote about all the shadow bans and just Twitter banning accounts, and also Google banning crypto accounts. So I kind of write about the issues that everybody's talking about on Twitter that's not necessarily about price speculation and whatnot.
Okay. So, and this is something you kind of touched on. What are your thoughts on the media really seeming like they're attempting to downplay what blockchain is actually accomplishing?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely twofold. The media definitely does love to bash crypto. I think that they're a little bit easier on blockchain, but I see it both ways, and it seems to fluctuate because one day I see articles about how blockchain is a solution to everything. It's like blockchain can help me lose weight and make my hair really shiny. I mean, 2 days later, the same publication will basically be saying blockchain is useless and is never going to have any impact. So I do think some of it comes from trying to increase readership, but it depends on the publication. But at one point saying blockchain will get you clicks on your website, and then the next point bashing it will get you clicks. So I mean, I think really just creating an audience and driving engagement is really the reasoning behind that. But I will say, I will give it to the media. A lot of these news outlets, you'd say like a year ago, if they were even reporting about blockchain or crypto, there wasn't really a very good understanding of the technology or really what was going on in the space. So I mean, I see an evolution happening. They seem to be really taking pride in the people on their staff who are becoming experts in terms of reporting on blockchain and crypto. So I will give them credit for that.
Okay. So what do you think the biggest misconception is about crypto and blockchain from the average person?
And I think this question's twofold as well. In being in DC and having worked in corporate America quite a bit, I do see the misconception that blockchain is the solution to every problem. I think that is probably 90% of the time not the case. I think that there's oftentimes a better solution. I mean, the technology is still so nascent that it's not really built out to the capacity where it can be easily integrated or implemented within an organization. So, I think that I see that as the biggest misconception, that it's just kind of a plug and play, and people just say they're doing it to say they're doing it. And I think that really sets us back as well, because if we have these organizations and, people claiming that they're doing blockchain and they're not, people are going to expect pretty substantial outcomes when really there's very little work being done. So I think that's really one of the most common misconceptions, and I think it could be pretty detrimental.
Okay. So what are some of the main obstacles that these companies are facing when trying to implement blockchain technology?
So I come from completely from like a consulting background. That's kind of the take that I look on this. Okay. Is really figuring out what the problem is that you're trying to solve. A lot of times there's not a problem, and then a lot of times there's a solution that is cheaper and more effective than trying to solve it with blockchain. Blockchain's the sexy new term in technology. So that's why people are doing it. They're not doing it to actually improve their business more often than not, unfortunately. So I think that's the biggest hurdle, and that goes into kind of just kind of a consulting mindset, where is okay, what is the mission and vision of this organization, and really what are your goals and the objectives around those? Does blockchain align to kind of that organizational strategy? And if it does, great. Like, now let's move forward and figure out if it's a good fit for your problem. But if it doesn't, you're going to end up wasting resources and have a failed project. So I think, like, before you even get into like the nitty gritty of the technology, just thinking about it more in terms of, like strategically, is this a good fit? So I think that's the biggest hurdle, which is really not a big hurdle at all, because that's something that's so easy to do. And so once you know it's a good fit, you can move on to the technology. And I mean, obviously there's a hurdle there in terms of, usability and whatnot. But the biggest hurdle is like actually realizing that it's not a good fit for your organization, or it is a good fit. So really, that's kind of, to me, the big turning point that people need to be aware of.
Okay, definitely. So what are some use cases that you see companies being able to utilize blockchain outside of the normal currency or platform?
Right. Yeah. I think my favorite use case is definitely the currency piece. I love the potential of privacy coins, but I think one of the most feasible use cases in the foreseeable future is supply chain. I mean, IBM is already doing this, working with Walmart, working with the Mars company, I believe, and this seems like a very easy target because there isn't as big of like institutional bureaucracies to break down. I mean, there is some, but they've already piloted blockchain in like food supply chains many times, and it's been very successful. So I think we'll see supply chain take off, and kind of really any shade of supply chain as well. I mean, the State Department is now partnering with Coca-Cola, and they are actually using supply chain on the blockchain to really look at migrant workers for the next World Cup, and kind of like the whole human trafficking and forced labor around that. So they're definitely using blockchain for that. So I think supply chain is definitely the most feasible, and then other implementations that I think are really interesting is like the electronic health record, and really around identity use cases. But I think that's pretty far off, just because I'm working closely with VA, and their issues with the DoD and interoperability around electronic health records. There's just a lot of institutionalized barriers that will make it difficult to kind of see a sea change and start doing things on the blockchain.
Yeah. And you mentioned the interoperability issues. Kind of touch on your thoughts on where you see interoperability playing out in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like really, in my view, and I'm sure there is a lot of other examples, and the one that's closest to me is VA and DoD's electronic health record interoperability. And I think the piece that's such a challenge there is the standardization, is that you have two systems that are completely different, and there's no way to get them to work together. And so I think taking 200 steps back and standardizing the data that's there and putting it on the blockchain and actually empowering the patients, the active military and the veterans, with their own data, I think that will really help. I mean, honestly, it will push the missions of those organizations and really the transition of medical care when active duty military people are transitioning into kind of their veteran status. So I think that the blockchain has the potential to standardize and really push interoperability.
Okay. And this is something, you've kind of been touching on, but what role do you see the government playing in blockchain? Do you see them maybe pushing it away or trying to utilize it? What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I think the government is trying, at least the federal government is really trying to push blockchain. And if you look at the GSA, there's a lot of work that Justin Herman and like the Emerging Technology Group is doing to further blockchain adoption within the federal government. And they have some great pilot projects going on, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes of that. But that being said, I think in terms of the government adopting blockchain, there's a challenge there because the government has issues with kind of modernization and bringing in new technology to begin with. I mean, putting things on the cloud. A lot of offices and haven't even put their data on the cloud yet. So this would be a very big leap. I think it's possible, but I think rather than just jumping to it, being slow and taking a measured approach is absolutely essential to having it be successful, and then sustaining putting things on the blockchain, if that makes sense. But then
definitely.
Yeah, that's blockchain. I think that the government's very open to blockchain, but then when it comes to crypto, I mean, we see what's going on in kind of the regulatory bodies within the government, and that's a whole nother story. And if you're here in DC and you mention cryptocurrency in any relation to blockchain, you're kind of scoffed at. So definitely in this area, there's a huge separation of like blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's weird. So do you personally believe that decentralization would be positive for a government system?
I personally, in my opinion, think it would be very positive. But I've also done a lot of consulting work with the government. I don't know how it would happen.
Okay.
It's such a behemoth of so many different interests of different parties. I don't see how it would happen anytime soon. I mean, it's such a financial moneymaker for so many places. I mean, if you were to decentralize half of these agencies or kind of their processes, I mean, so many companies would go out of business. I mean, government workers would no longer have jobs. So I mean, there's definitely a lot of social impact that would happen as well. So I mean, I think that's with I mean, I'm glad the government is open to thinking about it. And they've started doing kind of contract acquisitions on the blockchain, which I think is a big step. But I I think any type of like decentralizing the whole government, something like that would take decades, because it only gets bigger and it only gets more complex and it only gets even more bureaucratic. So kind of breaking that apart without it crashing down will be very, very difficult unless you do it extremely slowly and you kind of have all the stakeholders on board.
Okay. So, do you think we could ever maybe see a system like what masternodes have, where if you have the currency, you're able to vote? Do you think we could ever see a voting system or something like that?
I think that's something that needs to be considered sooner rather than later. If there's any way that we can kind of push the government to do something on the blockchain, I think voting is a big one. I mean, but then again, you have to start thinking about identities on the blockchain and whatnot too. So it gets a little bit complicated, but our voting system is definitely broken. So that's something that I think there's so much potential for. I'm not an expert in that area, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are thinking about that. And being in America, we don't have a lot of time until the next big election. So, hopefully people can start testing it out and really get some solutions out there.
Okay. So, what are some ways that blockchain maybe is and can really develop third world countries who are maybe struggling economically?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different really interesting use cases, and I wrote a really quick and kind of, I thought it was kind of fun article for the Philanthropy Journal in kind of how humanitarian organizations can use blockchain to further their missions. And I went through, I don't know if it was like 7 or 9 different use cases. And I think the biggest, most feasible one right now is the one that's being done, and that's really the remittance and kind of peer-to-peer payments. Like that's happening now, and it's really impacting and giving people the ability to have financial freedom and take ownership of kind of how they spend money and how they transact within a global economy, which hasn't been done before. So in a lot of areas. So I think that's really the most feasible and the most powerful at this point. But then again, I mean, you just kind of go through the use cases in terms of identity, and I think it's the Bitfury group that's doing identities for refugees in Jordan. I think there's a few organizations who are partnering on that. That's been an extremely successful project in terms of kind of distributing stipend payments to refugees and giving them an identity and a way of creating a reputation. So once they leave these refugee camps, they have a ability to kind of transact with the world once they leave. And so identity is a big one, and then property rights. And this is something that we looked at with Women for Women. We really wanted to keep it narrow to make kind of what came out of my work actually actionable, but this is a big one, were property rights. A lot of the women in the areas in which Women for Women serve, the women often lose rights of their property if their husbands are killed in conflict. They'll own a home and land and they'll own cattle, and that's how they survive. But when their husbands die, they lose ownership of all of that property. It's given to whatever faction is in power, or whoever decides to take that, and they're effectively poor and own nothing and also have no way of making money. So I think property rights gets a little bit more complicated, but it's definitely not my area of expertise, but I think there's definitely a lot of potential around property rights. So I mean, the list can go on. It's just like so absolutely fascinating, and there's so many different ways that we can help people who are economically disadvantaged throughout the world. I think we just need to be smart about what's the most feasible, what makes the most sense. It doesn't make sense for us to throw all of our resources at every single one of these use cases, because in that case we won't get anything done. But just figuring out where, we're like for women, we just wanted to focus on the financial aspect of the work, and that I think will lead to the project being more successful.
Yeah, definitely. You really brought up some interesting points, and something I kind of wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on maybe countries starting to create their own currencies?
I mean, I go back and forth on this. I mean, I don't really see how that's useful. I mean, if the U.S. had their own cryptocurrency, what would stop it from, manipulating it, or, we're going to see the same exact things happen. I mean, yeah, of course, sure, there are some efficiencies that would be created, but do I think it's worth all of the effort, all the taxpayer dollars that are going to go into it, and all the fraud, waste, and abuse you see the government do every day, regardless of what they're working on? I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it will have that much impact. Where I think, this is just my opinion and kind of my view on the world, but I think the biggest thing is really getting away from a centralized entity controlling how we transact with one another. And cryptocurrency and the blockchain is really going to be what makes that a possibility, whether it be transferring value in terms of money or, transferring information. So I think, sure, governments can create their own cryptocurrency, but, I don't really see anything new or fascinating about that.
Okay. So do you see the inflation of the US dollar and then the different fiat currencies having an effect on the overall value of cryptocurrencies?
I'm not an expert in this arena, but,
Okay.
I want to say, at some point, I hope there's not, right? I hope that the inflation and kind of manipulation of other currencies, that we see that driving people to use cryptocurrency rather than fiat currency. That's what I can only hope for. I can't really say, I'm not an economist, so I can't really say the cause and effect, but I hope someday that, people will kind of be enlightened that they don't have to live with some government or some central bank regulating or, having some say over the way that they spend money or, what their money is valued at. So I can see people wanting to push more towards this model of cryptocurrency and, this global way of spending money.
Okay. So, and you mentioned this earlier, you wrote an article for 21 Cryptos talking about the Twitter censorship in crypto accounts. Kind of touch on that.
Yeah, so that was definitely an interesting time. And I'm not sure how much shadow banning is happening anymore, but crypto or Twitter was heavily censoring any reference to cryptocurrency, and it wasn't just Twitter. Google was doing it as well. I spoke with Joel and Travis from the Bad Crypto podcast, and Google had shut down their YouTube page and disabled their Gmail account just because it was relating to crypto. Like they don't even sell anything. So it's scary. And they were also censoring other things as well. But just within crypto, it was just super fascinating that Twitter was either shutting down accounts or doing this shadow banning where people were still tweeting, but their tweets were kind of like muted. People weren't viewing their or seeing their tweets that came out. So it was definitely an interesting time. And, I did a Twitter poll and kind of asked for people to send me their stories. And, it was really, really fascinating because people take so much pride in the identity that they create, whether it be anonymous or not. And a lot of people weren't even actually tweeting anything bad. And I think some of it stemmed from the whole scam that said, okay, send me, 0.2 Ether and I'll send you one back. And so I did kind of find a correlation between people joking about that and having their accounts shut down. But yeah, it was just like really sad because a lot of these people, like someone said they had their account for 10 years and that they were curating and they really kind of valued the community they had created around their content. And they lost it all and had to create a new account. So it was definitely really interesting, and I think it kind of just was a little bit of a glimpse of, what's the potential. We rely on these like centralized applications. I mean, look at Twitter. I mean, I'm on Twitter 24/7, and most of us are. Like, what if Twitter started heavily, and even more heavily, censoring the way that we can interact with others in this crypto community? And that's really frightening. But then again, there's the possibility that blockchain can bring is really someone needs to create an amazing platform that is completely decentralized. And, a lot of folks are working on it. There's been, quite a few platforms that have popped up in response to that. So I think it was definitely just kind of, I think we were kind of lucky because it, made it a little bit more real how these central entities can really impact the way we live our lives.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Bad Crypto podcast because I was actually trying to set up a Facebook page for my podcast. And I tried 2 or 3 times, and Facebook actually kept like taking it out or taking it down and locking me out of my account. It was honestly really frustrating. So why do you think they're trying to ban and try to go against the crypto related content?
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I could never really track it down, but from most of my research, it really did seem to kind of stem from possibly a benevolent concern for users in terms of, okay, there are a lot of scams going on in crypto. There's a lot of, really semi-scammy ICOs. So I think it was intended to protect users from kind of being sucked into those scams. I mean, even on my Snapchat and my Instagram, though, I get weird ads for like Ty Lopez, like how to make $1 million with crypto. So I'm like, why aren't they regulating that? I'm not sure, but they're really, sure, there's like less, 1%, let's say there's 1% of content out there that's trying to scam people, but by shutting this all down, they're actually stifling the voices of people who are actually trying to build and to create and really innovate in this space. And that's really kind of what is sad to see come from all of this.
Yeah. So to someone who's maybe not a believer in blockchain and crypto, what would be a couple things you would maybe point to them or try to tell them?
I would say, and this is kind of how when people ask me to explain blockchain to them, my thing is always, okay, well, like I personally don't have any idea how a car works. And I don't really need to know how a car works in order to drive it and get from point A to point B. And I think, people who don't have the time or don't have the interest in diving really deep into this technology, like, they don't need to know either. And it's the same can be said with the internet. So I think really what's important is understanding the possibilities, understanding the potential of the technology. And the same thing happened with the internet. You didn't need to understand it to realize like this was a way to communicate and really create a way to transact online. And so I think kind of moving that sentiment to the blockchain and to cryptocurrency. And when you think about cryptocurrency, it's, like when my dad tried to buy cryptocurrency a few months ago, and his on Coinbase, he was on Coinbase, and his bank kept blocking his transactions. And that's where my dad just became like a full-on believer, because he was like, holy crap, I never even thought about my bank being able to say how I can spend my money. And that's what I was like, it's, we can't just think of the sense like only thinking as Americans. We have quite a bit of freedom, but, in other places that don't have the type of freedoms that we do, there's just this insane potential. And, it's happening where, not only banks, but, governments are kind of stifling the way that people can, and even outside of using money, the way that people can talk on the internet. I can't remember where it was. It was China or Japan, like the Me Too movement. That's been kind of banned from the internet. So, that was, not getting into political beliefs, but that definitely, the Me Too movement was very important to a community in the States, and it's really sad to see that can't happen somewhere else because of a centralized entity stifling communication. So, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. So, I think that's, if you want to explain to people, why this is so, like, that's the thing. We need to explain to people why this is important, not what it is. And those are just like a few of like the extreme examples. And, I think when we talked about the use cases, it's pretty apparent why this is so important as well.
Yeah, and it's funny, again, you mentioned your dad. Coinbase has done the exact same thing to me. My bank and my card has blocked multiple charges, and it's really frustrating, and it kind of brings up the point. I don't think a lot of people understand how centralized their money actually is, and that they really don't control it. So kind of what are your thoughts on people actually having full control of their money and also their data? Do you think people are ready for that?
I think people would be ready for it if, there was some type of extremely easy user-friendly interface. Coinbase has done, regardless of your opinions on Coinbase, like, you can't get around. They've done an amazing job at really lowering the barrier for entry for a lot of people into crypto. And, it all is around user friendliness. And so I think if we could do that for identity and data, I think that would be, and people would really value that. And we're seeing it more and more and more with, with the whole Facebook thing happening, with every leak that ever happens, in terms of cybersecurity. And, this is becoming more and more important. And, in Europe, we're seeing with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, I believe it is. There's a lot to be said for, people are becoming more concerned about how companies and how organizations are collecting their data, how they're protecting it, and then, how they're actually profiting off of it. So if we could actually put the data back into, people's hands, I think they'd be extremely powerful. And honestly, I think it's a great way to monetize. People can monetize the data they choose to monetize. And so I think there's a lot of potential around that as well.
Okay. So what are some of the best resources that maybe you have used or you have experience with for actually learning about blockchain technology?
So I have a Medium post about this, just about, how the resources that I really turned to when I was first kind of learning about blockchain. And I found those to be the most useful. But I think there's not one that I can point to that I can say was my aha moment. I definitely understood it. I think the most important thing that I tell people to do when, wanting to learn more about blockchain is just read and read and try and learn it again and in different ways. So I just sit on Medium and just go through article after article if I want to learn something, even just about like the cryptography piece, that's very interesting to me. So I just literally just constantly try and consume as much information as humanly possible. So there's not one that I can specifically speak to. I mean, I do love Chris Bernitzky's crypto assets book. I mean, that is just like such a beautiful entry into this world. So that's like always my recommendation to folks, in terms of, if you really have no background in it or understanding of it, that's definitely the book to read in terms of cryptocurrency. But, for blockchain, I think it's the best thing to do is just sit on the internet and read as much as possible. And, I do have like that. I have 2 Medium posts. One of them is actually about just that.
Okay. So who is someone in maybe the blockchain space or the crypto community that you really admire, and then kind of why do you admire them?
I'm going to say, I really, really, and honestly, some of the people I admire the most are some of the women working in this space. I think like Elizabeth Stark is just absolutely genius. Meltem, she's phenomenal as well. And I go to every post or every talk that they give. I always watch those just because they're really leading the way in this space. But then also. I always give a shout out to Coin Center. That's like my go-to in terms of like the regulatory piece, and just really the work that they do is really phenomenal. And they put out some like really, really long papers, but there's a ton of information on there as well. So I definitely think that the work they're doing is just absolutely incredible. And people don't donate there enough, but they're really fighting for the entire community.
Okay, definitely. So talk about how you personally really manage to balance your lifestyle, between your writing and crypto and then blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I haven't been balancing it all that well. But I think, I think it's okay. I mean, don't sleep very much, but I think when, I've just become so passionate about this, and, I just pour myself into it. So I think that's really there really is no balance. I just try and do it as much as possible. And, I just take joy in it all the time. I think the writing piece is a lot more challenging. I am not a writer by nature. It's something I've definitely had to pick up. And, the opportunity with 21 Cryptos has been really wonderful. It's allowed me to kind of hone that skill as well. But I think that's something that's been really important to me, and I haven't had a chance to just kind of write on Medium enough, because I think actually putting out content and even just putting out your opinions out there on Twitter is really important, because this isn't a huge community, and so the more that people talk and the more that people speak up, the more ideas that might actually stick and get somewhere.
Yeah. So what are a couple of things you maybe enjoy outside of crypto?
Oh man. So and this is I don't know, most people I think know this about me, but I love entomology, so I love bugs.
Okay.
And I love animals. This is my biology background, so I have a lot of pets. I have kind of like a little makeshift zoo, so I have like a lot of beetles and tarantulas, and I have a wonderful pet bearded dragon and my my strange dog. So it's yeah, that's definitely my hobby. I love like getting on Reddit and going into like bug wars or you know subreddits where people kind of try and identify bugs. So that's kind of just like my upbringing and my education, my academic background coming into play. Bugs are kind of my thing.
Okay. So where do you want to be in maybe 5 to 10 years? Do you still want to be writing? Do you still want to be involved in blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the hope. That's definitely the goal. I've kind of stopped making, 5, 10 year goals, just because I will have to say, my path has been really strange. So, I never envisioned myself being here in any capacity. So I don't ever like to constrain myself, and I just like to let the road go wherever it's going to take me. I definitely, ideally, when I'm thinking about it, would love to still be in this space. I'd love to be pushing out content still, definitely more content than I'm producing right now. And then, just kind of being involved with whatever project comes my way. That's, just finding a project that kind of fits with what I want to do in this space, or that's would be ideal.
Okay. So, where do you see the blockchain and the crypto space being in the future? Do you think we'll truly see it revolutionize the world?
Um, yes. I mean, I think that it's going to. I don't. When we say revolutionize, I don't think it's going to be like something crazy like time travel or like teleportation would do. But I think we're going to see things get a lot easier, and it's really empower the little people, so to speak, and really bringing people into a global economy, which I think is very important. And kind of seeing like the leveling out of wealth would be definitely interesting. So I definitely see blockchain growing. I think there's going to be lots of ups and downs, and it's and with any emerging technology, there's going to be an uphill battle. But I think as long as everyone working in this space is responsible, and we can kind of in some way self-regulate and weed out the scams and all the bad actors, I think we can push this forward, and it really has the potential to be something great.
All right, Desiree. Well, that's all the questions I have lined up for you. So I'll kind of give you the floor and just kind of let you give your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is thank you so much for having me on. If you're interested in learning more about or hearing more of my rants, definitely follow me on Twitter at Dickerson_Des. You can definitely follow me there, and definitely check out the work that Women for Women International is doing. It's an amazing organization. They have so many great people on the board, kind of guiding their mission and vision. So definitely check it out, and donate if you can.
That's all for the interview. I hope you enjoyed this episode and really took something away from it. Desiree is extremely knowledgeable in the blockchain space, and she really taught me a lot of things, and I really enjoyed talking to her. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next week.